Welcome everybody to our podcast today. We're recording this on the 12th of June 2025 in Belgrade on the fringes of a very significant conference on the subject of the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM in other words. The conference today has brought together stakeholders from throughout the Western Balkan regions, industry, which is preparing for CBAM, policymakers. Our keynote speaker first thing this morning was the Serbian Minister for Trade, and we've had some lawyers and some other experts also contribute today. And one of the experts we've had with us is Milena Popovic-Martinelli, who joins me now to speak further about how she sees things in her role at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD, where she's the regional policy lead. And she's been in that role since May 2022. Before that, she was a consultant where she was essentially advising most of the time industry, I believe, on how they can decarbonize, how they can get ready to fall into line with all these various different green regulations which have been coming out of Brussels. And I think a key issue which you're an expert on, Milena, thank you for joining us today, is money, funding. It costs money to go green. It's not easy being green, as Kermit the Frog used to say. It certainly costs a lot of money. Your bank is one of the avenues for that. There are a number of other sources of funds, but perhaps you could share with us your experiences, the things you've learnt, the things your bank can do, and your general thoughts.
Thank you, Anne, very much. It's great to be here. And thank you for this opportunity to make the podcast. It's my first podcast ever, so I'll always remember it, for good or for bad. Just putting the joke aside, indeed, in EBRD, particularly in my current role and in my previous role, which was about climate strategy delivery, we basically worked with bankers, but also with the policymakers in the Western Balkans, and we still work with them to facilitate green transition. As a development bank, green and environmentally friendly investments are part of our mandate. So I often get asked a question, with the changes, geopolitical changes, are you going to change your approach? And the answer to that question is no. I mean, the question is above my pay grade, but the answer for the time being is certainly no. And the reason being that basically the investments that EBRD and projects that EBRD supports, they're not just green. The point is that they are economically and financially viable. So it makes sense to do these things. It makes sense to have renewables auctions that we supported, that in the last round basically provided megawatt hour from solar for 50 to 59 euros per megawatt hour, or for wind that was slightly above 60 euros per megawatt hour. So it's cheap, it's clean, and it's for the citizens of the country. And that is something, for example, that we are doing around the region. So one of the ways we are supporting green transition is by working with the regulators to unlocking the market, to basically introduce regulatory changes to unlock and to bring in the private capital for the investments that have a real economic and business sense, that are win-win solutions. So that is one of the ways. what we do a lot, recognizing that particularly in this region, green projects, basically, what are they in essence? They are the introduction of innovative technologies or innovative processes. And you're right, that costs money, but that is also sometimes difficult and complex to implement and to do because you're doing it for the first time. Once it's scaled up, then it becomes cheaper, it becomes faster. But we put a lot of resources, also financial resources, into the preparation of these first-of-a-kind projects. And we work very closely with donors to ensure that the donor funding, so concessional loans, so very cheap loans or even grants, are basically transferred to clients to make these projects even more, so to say, affordable. And then last but not least, being a bank, a development bank, we are certainly involved in the project finance. And the flagship projects that we are doing are not only about decarbonizing, for example, electricity, but it's also about decarbonizing the heat sector. And it's once you decarbonize the heating systems, you're not only reducing the GHG, but you're improving the air quality. So we are working with the district heating systems. We are working with changing the individual boilers from heavy oil, mazout, to green technologies. And air quality project was basically signed yesterday. We are really proud of that. It took a long time to prepare. And then on the demand side, it's not just about the supply, it's also about the demand. It's about energy efficiencies. So that also requires investments. Coming back to your question about financing, what we find increasingly, I can't say 100%, but financing for green projects is available. It's going to be more and more difficult to provide or to find financing for non-green. And it's going to be more expensive to get financing for non-green. Because apart from the donors, the international financial institutions, MDBs, commercial banks that are certainly willing to also green their portfolios and invest in such projects, there are also various other mechanisms, like there are the guarantees, which are making basically financing cheaper and more affordable. So it's not about the lack of financing. At this stage, it's not necessarily about the cost of financing, but it's about the availability of mature projects to finance. And I think that is where we should pay more attention to.
I wanted to come back to you on that because we've heard a couple of calls today from the side of the Serbian government saying, industry, come with your projects, get your projects ready. What's involved, practically speaking, for example, a steel mill or a fertilizer manufacturing facility that needs to implement some new technology, has already perhaps done the maximum they can do with the technology they've got to become more efficient, and the imperative is there now, with CBAM taking full effect from the 1st of January 2026. Practically speaking, what do you have to do to get your project ready to then attract the funds, to then be able to implement it? What do you have to do?
What's the process behind it?
Yes.
Okay. So kind of a non-technical response would be, you need to start from the baseline, like where you are now. What are your emissions? What are your efficiencies? What is your electricity or heat consumption, so energy consumption, or other input material consumptions? And then, of course, I mean, it's where you want to get to. And that's a very interesting one, because when we look at CBAM and in general, when companies are assessing CBAM, they're just assessing it as if it's applied only to them. It is applied, of course, to them and to the exports. But the point is that it is going to change substantially competitiveness landscape,
right,
because you're not just competing with your quality or with your emission factor. What you are competing also against all the others and their emission factors, and it's basically how you position yourself vis-a-vis, I don't know, products from other countries, Turkey, Egypt, so this one. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's the point. So you need to decide where you want to be. Based on that, it's about assessing the available technologies and cost-benefit analysis. Like, is it worth it? Or is it not worth it? And finding the optimal one, that's what it's about. One point that is, I think, important to note, and I'm not an engineer, this is from an economist, like the explanation how it works. But one important point to note is that today we heard that Serbia is going to introduce carbon taxing, some sort of carbon taxation, levy, from the 1st of January 2026. Once you put a price on pollution, on carbon or any other pollutant, that basically changes also the assessments of projects. So maybe some projects that did not seem bankable become bankable, and vice versa. Polluting projects are not bankable anymore. So that is also an important variable to consider, how that will impact the landscape going forward.
So as soon as that information is available and that tax is there, so to speak, it's going to bring a lot more business certainty.
I think, yes, definitely. I think that the private sector, and not just the private sector, I mean the public sector, reacts badly to uncertainty, let's put it like that, and prefers and even flourishes with certainty and with visibility. So the sooner the air is clear, not just from the local policymakers, but also from Brussels in terms of the intentions and how this mechanism, because there are still a lot of things that we don't understand. As soon as we have more information, I think, certainly the adaptation is going to start, because now the economy doesn't have the reference point to adapt to.
Perhaps to slightly change tack just very quickly before we end, do you think that we already have the right technologies? You were talking about before, when you're going into a project as an industry player, you need to assess the available technologies. To your mind, do we already have enough technologies to get us where we want to go, or do we still need a lot of scientific work, research, innovation, and how does that get funded in turn?
I think, again, just my personal view is that at the moment we have enough technologies. There is certainly a lot of research ongoing on green hydrogen or on SMRs, so there are many things that are still not economically feasible. However, we do have technologies that are available and that would provide efficiencies, energy and resource efficiencies for the period of the next, 5-10 years, or potentially even more. I mean, the fact that whenever a gas pipeline is being built, you're making it hydrogen ready. So those are the kind of achievements what we have now. We are preparing for the future, and that is what we have enough of it, at least That's my, again, non-engineering response.
But
what
nevertheless, that's a positive message.
Yes,
that's a positive message.
I think overall it's going to be dynamic because, again, we have very short time here in the region for the policymakers to make decisions, do the necessary changes and regulatory changes, but also talk to the private sector about the specific solutions. We know it's carbon tax, but which sectors, how much, how is the green fund or how are these revenues going to be used for what kind of projects, etc. That is all a dialogue that is still, it's ahead of us, but it's a positive dialogue, definitely.
Well, it's good to end on a positive note. Thank you very much for being with us today, Milena. And
thank you, Anne.
I'm sure we'll be talking again because we have a long road to travel, but work has started and everybody has to work together. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much.